The morning sun rose over the wheat fields of Kepler 442b just like it had for the past 5 years since humans first landed on this world. Jake Morrison stood on his front porch, drinking his coffee and watching the golden grain wave in the gentle breeze. He had been a soldier once back on Earth, but now he was just a farmer trying to make a living on humanity's newest colony world. The peace ended when the sky turned black. Massive ships appeared above the clouds, blocking out the sun with their enormous hulls. Jake dropped his coffee cup and ran inside to grab his old military radio. The emergency channel was already buzzing with panicked voices. "This is Colonial Defense Command," came the voice of Captain Jake Morrison's old friend, Lisa Hayes. "All civilians get to the shelters now. We have unknown ships in orbit." Jake looked up at the alien vessels and felt his old soldier instincts kick in. These ships were not here to talk. They were here to take his world. The first alien shuttles landed an hour later. They came down in the center of New Haven, the colony's main town, with engines that screamed like angry animals. The ships were sleek and silver, covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at directly. When the doors opened, the creatures that stepped out were nothing like humans had ever seen. They stood 8 feet tall on 4 legs with arms that ended in claws instead of hands. Their heads were long and narrow, with eyes that glowed red in the dim light. They wore armor that seemed to be made from some kind of living metal that moved and shifted as they walked. The leader of the aliens stepped forward and activated a device that spoke in perfect English. "I am War Leader Thexnor of the Zephyrian Collective. You will surrender this world to us immediately. Any resistance will result in your complete destruction." Lisa Hayes had been hiding behind an overturned farming vehicle with 12 of her Marines. She looked at the aliens through her scope and counted at least 200 of them in the first wave. More shuttles were coming down from the big ships above. "Like hell we will," she whispered into her radio. "All units, these things think we're going to roll over and die. Let's show them what humans do when someone tries to take our home." The first shot came from Sergeant Ron Parker, who had been a demolitions expert before becoming a farmer. He had rigged the town's grain silo with every bit of explosive fertilizer he could find. When the aliens got close enough, he triggered the blast. The explosion was so loud it could be heard for miles. The grain silo went up like a volcano, sending chunks of concrete and twisted metal flying in all directions. 20 aliens were killed instantly, and the rest scrambled for cover behind their shuttles. War Leader Thexnor had never seen anything like it. In 17 successful conquests, the enemy had always tried to negotiate or run away. These humans had just blown up their own building to kill his warriors. "Attack formations," he snarled into his communicator. "Kill them all." The battle for New Haven began in earnest. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and armor, but the humans had something the aliens did not expect. They knew their own land better than anyone else. Lisa Hayes had spent months preparing for this exact situation. Every building in town had been turned into a potential fortress. Every piece of farming equipment had been modified to become a weapon. The irrigation ditches had been filled with explosive charges that could be triggered remotely. When the aliens advanced on the town center, they found themselves walking into a maze of death traps. Hidden cameras showed the humans exactly where their enemies were, while the aliens stumbled through streets they had never seen before. Danny Brooks, a former Marine who now ran the colony's communications center, had turned the town's entire radio network into a command system. He sat in his reinforced bunker, watching screens that showed him every corner of the battle, and directed human fighters with the precision of a master chess player. "Lisa, you have 6 hostiles coming up Main Street," he said into his headset. "Ron, there's a group trying to flank you from the east. Jake, that big one with all the decorations, is heading for the school." The humans moved like ghosts through their own town. They used drainage tunnels to appear behind enemy lines, popped up from hidden positions to take shots, and disappeared before the aliens could respond. Every human knew exactly where to go and what to do, because they had lived here for years. War Leader Thexnor was growing frustrated. His warriors were the finest in the collective, trained from birth to conquer worlds. But these humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They did not fight with honor or follow any recognizable tactics. They just killed his people and vanished. "Bring down more troops," he ordered. "I want 5,000 warriors on the ground within the hour." By sunset, the aliens had landed their full invasion force. 12,000 Zephyrian warriors surrounded the small human settlement. War leader Thexnor was confident that tomorrow would bring victory. He was wrong. The humans spent the night turning their world into a weapon. Jake Morrison, who had been quiet for most of the day, emerged as a natural leader. He organized the 300 colonists into small teams, each with a specific job to do. Some teams focused on making bombs from household chemicals. Others dug tunnels and set up ambush points. The farmers used their knowledge of the land to create obstacles that would channel the alien advance into kill zones. Amy Rodriguez, who ran the colony's power plant, had the most dangerous job of all. She began the delicate process of turning the fusion reactor that powered their settlement into the biggest bomb any of them had ever seen. "If they want our world," she said to Jake as she worked on the reactor controls, "they can have it. But they're going to pay a price that will make the whole galaxy think twice about messing with humans." As the alien ships hung in the sky above them, casting shadows over the wheat fields that had been their home, the humans of Kepler 442b prepared to teach the galaxy its first lesson about what it meant to fight a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous worlds in the universe. The Zephyrians thought they were conquering farmers. They were about to discover they had picked a fight with humanity itself. The second day of fighting began before sunrise. Jake Morrison had not slept at all during the night. He spent the dark hours moving from position to position, checking on his people, and making sure everyone knew their part in the plan they had built together. The Zephyrian forces surrounded the town in a perfect circle, just like their military training had taught them. War leader Thexnor was confident that his overwhelming numbers would crush the human resistance in a matter of hours. He was about to learn his first lesson about fighting humans. At exactly 6 in the morning, Lisa Hayes triggered the first surprise. The irrigation system that had watered the colony's crops for 5 years suddenly became a network of death. Explosive charges hidden in the underground pipes detonated in sequence, creating a chain of blasts that ran in a complete circle around the town. The explosions did not kill many aliens, but they served a different purpose. They created a ring of fire and smoke that hid the humans' movements, while forcing the Zephyrian forces to advance through choke points that Lisa and her team had carefully prepared. Sergeant Ron Parker was waiting in the first choke point with a weapon he had built from farming equipment. The colony's combine harvester had been turned into a mobile fortress, with armor plating welded to its sides and its grain-cutting blades replaced with rotating saws. When the first group of aliens tried to advance through the gap in the fire line, Ron drove his improvised war machine straight into them. The sight of a bright yellow farming vehicle cutting through trained warriors like wheat shocked the Zephyrian forces. They had never seen anything like it. Their weapons were designed to fight other soldiers, not agricultural equipment that had been turned into an instrument of war. War leader Thexnor watched his elite troops scatter in panic and felt something he had never experienced in 17 conquests: doubt. These humans did not fight like any enemy he had faced before. They seemed to enjoy turning peaceful things into weapons of destruction. "Advance on all fronts," he ordered his commanders. "Do not let them regroup." But the humans were not trying to regroup. They were executing a plan that none of the aliens could understand because it made no logical sense from a military perspective. Danny Brooks sat in his command bunker, surrounded by screens that showed him every part of the battlefield. The communications equipment he had built from spare parts was better than anything the colony was supposed to have. He had been preparing for this day since the moment they landed on this world. "Amy, how much time do you need?" he asked into his headset. Amy Rodriguez's voice came back from the power plant where she was still working on her dangerous project with the fusion reactor. "Give me 2 more hours. This thing needs to be perfect or we all die when I flip the switch." "You got it," Danny replied. Then he switched to the general frequency. "All teams, we need to buy Amy 2 hours. Make it count." What happened next became the stuff of legend among the species that monitored galactic communications. The 300 human colonists began a coordinated defense that used every trick, trap, and improvised weapon they could create. Jake Morrison led a team that had turned the colony's delivery drones into flying bombs. The small aircraft that once carried supplies between farms now carried explosives directly into groups of advancing aliens. The Zephyrians tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, and they moved too fast. Lisa Hayes had positioned her Marines in buildings throughout the town, but not in the way any military manual would recommend. Instead of defending fixed positions, they moved constantly through tunnels they had dug between basements. They would appear in one building, fire on the aliens, then disappear and pop up somewhere else entirely. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Every time they thought they had surrounded a group of humans, their targets vanished like smoke. Ron Parker had abandoned his harvester after it finally broke down and was now leading a team of farmers who had turned their knowledge of chemistry into a weapon. They mixed fertilizers and cleaning supplies to create bombs that filled the air with choking smoke. The aliens' superior vision meant nothing when they could not see through the thick clouds of gas. As the morning turned to afternoon, something strange began happening to the Zephyrian forces. They started making mistakes. Warriors who had trained for decades began firing at shadows. Units lost communication with their commanders. Some aliens reported seeing humans in places where no humans could possibly be. War leader Thexnor realized that his troops were becoming afraid. Fear was not something Zephyrian warriors were supposed to feel, but these humans had created an atmosphere of terror that was affecting his people's ability to fight. "Bring down the orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Level the entire settlement." But when his ship commanders tried to target the human positions, they discovered another surprise. Amy Rodriguez had been busy with more than just the fusion reactor. She had also modified the colony's communication array to broadcast a jamming signal that interfered with the Zephyrian targeting systems. The orbital weapons could not lock onto anything smaller than the entire colony, and firing on that scale would kill the Zephyrian forces on the ground as well as the humans. As the sun began to set on the second day, War Leader Thexnor looked at his casualty reports and felt something close to panic. He had lost over 3,000 warriors to an enemy force that numbered less than 300. His troops were exhausted, frightened, and beginning to question whether they could win this battle at all. The humans, meanwhile, showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, they seemed to be getting stronger as the fight continued, adapting their tactics and finding new ways to turn everyday objects into instruments of war. Danny Brooks watched the alien positions on his screens and smiled grimly. The Zephyrians were learning what humans had known for thousands of years. It was not the size of the army that mattered, but the will to fight and the creativity to find new ways to hurt your enemies. "One more day," he said into his radio. "Amy needs one more day, and then we show these things what happens when you pick a fight with Earth's children." In the growing darkness, the colonists of Kepler 442b prepared for the third day of a battle that would echo across the galaxy and teach every species one simple truth: humans were the most dangerous creatures in the universe when someone threatened their home. The third day began with silence. No explosions, no gunfire, no alien war cries echoing across the battlefield. Jake Morrison stood at his observation post and watched the Zephyrian forces through his binoculars. They had not moved from their positions since before dawn. War leader Thexnor was making his own observations from his command shuttle. In 2 days of fighting, he had lost nearly half his invasion force to 300 human farmers. His warriors were tired, scared, and starting to question his leadership. Some had even suggested retreat. The idea of retreating from such a small enemy force was unthinkable. The Zephyrian collective had never been defeated by anyone, especially not by a species they had never heard of before this mission. But the numbers did not lie. His forces were being destroyed by an enemy that should have been crushed on the first day. "Today we end this," Thexnor announced to his remaining commanders. "I want every warrior we have left to advance at the same time. No more small attacks. We overwhelm them with pure numbers." In the human command bunker, Danny Brooks was listening to the alien communications through equipment he had built to intercept their signals. He turned to his radio and spoke calmly to his people. "This is it, everyone. They are going to throw everything they have at us in one big attack. Amy, please tell me you are ready. Amy Rodriguez's voice came through the speaker, tired but determined. The reactor is ready. When I activate it, we will have exactly 10 minutes to get everyone to the safe zones before this whole area becomes very unhealthy. And the aliens? Any alien ship within 5 miles of here is going to have a very bad day. Jake Morrison gathered his team leaders in the town center for what might be their last meeting. Lisa Hayes looked exhausted but alert. Ron Parker was covered in dirt and grease from working on his improvised weapons all night. Everyone looked at Jake with trust in their eyes, waiting for his final orders. We have held them for 3 days, Jake said quietly. 300 of us against 12,000 of them. That is something to be proud of. But now they are going to come at us with everything they have left. Amy's plan will work, but we need to keep them busy long enough for her to get into position. How long? Lisa asked. 30 minutes. We need to hold them for 30 more minutes. Ron Parker laughed, but there was no humor in it. Hell, we have come this far. 30 minutes should be easy. The final battle began when the Zephyrian forces attacked from all directions at once. 8,000 alien warriors charged toward the human positions, their weapons firing continuously. The sound was like thunder that never stopped. The humans met them with everything they had learned in 3 days of constant fighting. Lisa Hayes and her Marines appeared and disappeared like ghosts, using their tunnel system to strike and vanish before the aliens could respond. Ron Parker's team released clouds of poisonous gas that forced the aliens to slow their advance while they activated their breathing equipment. Danny Brooks coordinated the defense from his bunker, but even he could see that they were being overwhelmed. There were simply too many aliens, and they were advancing too fast. Amy, whatever you are going to do, do it now, he said into his radio. Amy Rodriguez was no longer in the power plant. She had spent the night moving the modified fusion reactor to a position directly under the landing zone where the Zephyrian shuttles were parked. The device she had created was not exactly a bomb. It was something much more dangerous. When she activated it, the reactor began to release energy in a way that fusion reactors were never designed to do. Instead of controlled nuclear fusion, it created an uncontrolled electromagnetic pulse that spread outward in all directions at the speed of light. The pulse hit the Zephyrian shuttles first. Every piece of electronic equipment on the alien aircraft died instantly. The ships that had been hovering in the air fell to the ground like stones. The ones on the ground would never fly again. But the pulse did not stop there. It continued, expanding upward, reaching the Zephyrian battlecruisers in orbit around the planet. The massive ships, which had seemed invincible from the ground, suddenly went dark as their power systems failed completely. War leader Thexnor was in his command shuttle when the pulse hit. One moment he was watching his forces advance on the human positions, and the next moment he was sitting in a dead ship that was falling toward the planet's surface. The shuttle crashed in a wheat field 2 miles from town. Thexnor survived the impact, but most of his staff did not. He crawled out of the wreckage and looked up at the sky, where his once mighty fleet was now just scattered pieces of metal falling like burning rain. On the ground, the Zephyrian warriors found themselves cut off from their commanders and their supply ships. Their advanced weapons stopped working. Their communication equipment was dead. They were stranded on a hostile world with no way to call for help. Jake Morrison's voice echoed across the battlefield from speakers that Amy had protected. From the electromagnetic pulse, attention Zephyrian forces. Your ships are destroyed, your weapons are broken, you have 2 choices. Surrender now, or we will show you what humans do to invaders who threaten our families. Some of the aliens tried to continue fighting with primitive weapons, but they had lost the will to fight. Others simply sat down and waited to see what would happen next. A few began walking toward the human positions with their hands raised in what they hoped was a universal gesture of surrender. War leader Thexnor stood in the wheat field and looked at the burning remains of his fleet falling from the sky. In 3 days, 300 human farmers had destroyed the most powerful invasion force the Zephyrian collective had ever assembled. He activated his personal emergency beacon, knowing that it would take weeks for another Zephyrian ship to reach this system. When they arrived, they would find the survivors of his force and learn the truth about what had happened here. The truth that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new and terrifying. Creatures who could turn anything into a weapon, and who fought with a combination of intelligence and savagery that no other species had ever displayed. As the sun set on the third day, the humans of Kepler 442b stood victorious in their wheat fields, surrounded by the wreckage of an alien armada. They had won their first battle, but they did not know that they had also started something much larger. They had given humanity a reputation that would echo across the galaxy. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the story of humanity's victory had spread to every corner of the galaxy. In the crystal cities of Nexus Prime, the crystalline assembly held emergency meetings that lasted for days. The ancient beings, who had kept peace between the stars for thousands of years, were deeply worried about these new creatures called humans. Kate Sullivan walked through the crystal corridors of the assembly building, her footsteps echoing in the vast halls. She was humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community, a job that no one had prepared her for, because no one expected humans to need galactic diplomacy so soon. Behind her walked Colonel Danny Brooks, who had volunteered to leave his quiet life on Kepler 442b to serve as her military advisor. The other species in the hallways moved away from them, whispering in languages that their universal translators could barely understand. "They are afraid of us," Kate said quietly to Danny as they approached the main assembly chamber. "Good," Danny replied. "Fear keeps people honest." The assembly chamber was a massive dome made entirely of living crystal that changed colors based on the emotions of the beings inside. When Kate and Danny entered, the entire dome turned dark red, the color of anxiety and fear. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in curved rows that spiraled up to the ceiling. Kate had studied files on most of the major species, but seeing them all together was overwhelming. There were the tall four-legged Zephyrians, the floating energy beings of the ethereal collective, the insect-like creatures of the hive mind, and dozens of other species she did not recognize. At the center of the chamber sat Harmony Singer of Truth, the eldest member of the assembly. The crystal being was over 3,000 years old and had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music played on glass instruments. "Ambassador Sullivan," the ancient being said, "we have called this gathering to discuss the actions of your species on Kepler 442b. The destruction of an entire Zephyrian battle fleet by a small farming colony has caused great concern throughout the galaxy." Kate stepped forward to the speaking platform in the center of the chamber. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but standing here in front of representatives from 50 different worlds made her feel very small and very human. "Honored members of the assembly," she began, "my people did not seek conflict with the Zephyrian collective. We were farmers trying to build a new life on a distant world. When we were attacked without warning or provocation, we defended ourselves using whatever means were available to us." A deep growling sound came from the Zephyrian section of the chamber. General Crixineth, the highest-ranking Zephyrian warrior who had not been at Kepler 442b, stood up slowly. His red eyes glowed with anger as he spoke. "The humans did not simply defend themselves," he said, his words dripping with contempt. "They used weapons of mass destruction against a lawful military operation. They violated every rule of civilized warfare. They fought without honor." Danny Brooks stepped forward before Kate could respond. His movement was casual, but every alien in the chamber could see the controlled precision in the way he moved. He was clearly a predator trying to look harmless. "General Crixineth," Danny said politely, "could you explain what you mean by a lawful military operation? Because from where I was sitting, it looked like 12,000 armed warriors attacking 300 farmers and their families." "The collective had legitimate territorial claims to that system," Crixineth replied. "Based on what law?" Danny asked. "The law of strength. We were stronger, so the territory was ours by right." Danny smiled, and somehow that smile made the crystal dome turn an even darker shade of red. "I see. So you believe that might makes right, that the strong can take whatever they want from the weak." "That is the way of the galaxy," Crixineth said proudly. "Then you should have no complaint about what happened to your people," Danny replied. "We were stronger, So we won. That is your law, not ours. The chamber erupted in confused chatter as the alien representatives tried to process what the human had just said. The Zephyrians prided themselves on being the strongest military force in the galaxy, but they had been utterly defeated by a handful of farmers. Harmony, Singer of Truth, raised one crystalline arm, and the chamber fell silent. Colonel Brooks, your species appears to possess military capabilities far beyond what our intelligence networks had predicted. This has created a situation of great instability in the galactic balance of power. Kate decided it was time to take control of the conversation. Honored Assembly, I want to make something very clear. Humanity does not seek to conquer or dominate anyone. We want to build peaceful relationships with all species and contribute to galactic civilization. But you must understand our concerns, said a representative from the Ethereal Collective, its voice echoing inside everyone's minds. Your species has demonstrated an ability to destroy advanced military forces using primitive technology. What happens when you develop advanced technology of your own? The same thing that has always happened when humans get better tools, Kate replied. We use them to build better lives for our families and explore new frontiers. The only time we use our tools as weapons is when someone threatens the people we care about. A new voice spoke from the upper levels of the chamber. It belonged to a creature that looked like a mechanical spider the size of a small building. This was Designation Alpha Prime, the war chief of the Void Stalkers, the nomadic raiders who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The Assembly wastes time with words, Alpha Prime said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. These humans are a threat that must be eliminated before they become too powerful to stop. My fleets volunteer to solve this problem. The crystal dome turned bright orange, the color of excitement and aggression. Many of the alien representatives began talking at once, some agreeing with the Void Stalker, others calling for caution. Danny Brooks looked up at the mechanical creature and spoke in a voice that somehow carried over all the noise in the chamber. Designation Alpha Prime, are you formally declaring war against humanity? I am declaring that your species will be removed from the galaxy, Alpha Prime replied. My fleets are already moving toward your core systems. Soon the galaxy will see that humans can be killed just like any other species. Kate felt her heart sink. She had come here hoping to establish peaceful relations with the galactic community. But instead, she had just witnessed humanity being threatened with extinction by one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. Danny Brooks, however, looked almost pleased. He activated his communicator and spoke into it clearly, making sure his words were picked up by all the recording devices in the chamber. Earth Command, this is Colonel Brooks. The Void Stalkers have just declared war on humanity in front of the Galactic Assembly. Recommend immediate implementation of Defense Protocol 7. He turned back to Alpha Prime with that same dangerous smile. Thank you for the warning. It is always nice when enemies are polite enough to announce their intentions in advance. As Kate and Danny left the assembly chamber, the crystal dome behind them pulsed with colors that had no names in any human language. The galaxy was about to learn another lesson about humanity, one that would be written in the wreckage of the most feared raider fleet in known space. The humans were not just good at defending their homes, they were about to show the galaxy what happened when someone was foolish enough to threaten Earth itself. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Defiant, watching the empty space around Jupiter through the main view screen. His fleet of 24 ships was hidden in the radiation shadow of the gas giant, waiting for an enemy that the rest of the galaxy considered unstoppable. The Void Stalkers had been raiding and destroying civilizations for over 500 years. Their 40 stealth ships could appear anywhere without warning, strike with devastating force, and vanish before anyone could respond. Entire worlds had been turned to ash by their attacks. But Ben Carter was not worried. He was excited. Admiral called Captain Amy Rodriguez from her position at the sensor station. She had volunteered to leave her quiet life on Kepler 442b to join Earth's defense fleet after helping to destroy the Zephyrian invasion. I am detecting spatial distortions near Europa. The stalkers are coming out of hyperspace. Right on schedule, Ben replied calmly. All ships prepare to execute Operation Mousetrap. On the other side of the solar system, the Void Stalker fleet materialized in space like dark shadows becoming real. Their ships were sleek and black, designed to be invisible to most sensor systems. Designation Alpha Prime stood in the command center of his flagship, studying the tactical displays with satisfaction. "The human homeworld is defenseless," he announced to his fleet commanders. "Our intelligence reports show only a few primitive vessels guarding their planet. This will be easier than destroying the farming colonies of the rim worlds." Alpha Prime was wrong about many things, but his biggest mistake was thinking that humans would fight the way other species fought. The Stalker fleet began its approach to Earth, moving in the standard attack formation that had served them well for centuries. They planned to overwhelm any defenses with their superior speed and firepower, then begin the systematic destruction of human civilization. They made it halfway to Mars before the trap was sprung. Captain Steve Walsh had been waiting in the asteroid belt with 6 small fighters that looked like space junk to Stalker sensors. When the enemy fleet passed his position, he activated a device that Amy Rodriguez had helped him build, using technology salvaged from the Zephyrian ships. The device sent out a signal that interfered with the Stalkers' stealth systems, making their ships visible to human sensors for the first time in the battle. Suddenly, the 40 invisible raiders were lit up like beacons in the darkness of space. "Now," Admiral Carter said quietly. The human fleet emerged from Jupiter's shadow, moving at full speed. 24 Earth ships against 40 Stalker vessels should have been a hopeless fight, but the humans had spent months preparing for this exact moment. Commander Grace Murphy led the first attack wave in her ship, the Wolverine. Instead of engaging the Stalkers in a traditional space battle, she did something that no military computer would have predicted. She rammed her ship directly into the side of the Stalker flagship at maximum velocity. The impact should have destroyed both ships, but Murphy had modified her vessel with reinforced armor and shock absorbers salvaged from mining equipment. Her ship survived the collision and tore a massive hole in the enemy flagship's hull. Before the Stalkers could recover from their shock, Murphy and her crew used emergency airlocks to board the damaged enemy ship. Within minutes, human Marines were fighting hand-to-hand combat in the corridors of Alpha Prime's command vessel. The rest of the human fleet used similar tactics that broke every rule of space warfare. Captain Tony Baker flew his ship through the middle of the Stalker formation, firing in all directions and forcing the enemy vessels to scatter to avoid hitting each other with their own weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Nancy Price commanded a squadron of fighters that had been modified to look like asteroids. Her pilots hid among the real rocks in the asteroid belt and attacked the Stalkers from behind whenever they tried to regroup. The battle lasted for 3 hours, but it was not really a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of human creativity and adaptability against an enemy that had become too comfortable with their own superiority. Designation: Alpha Prime found himself trapped in his own command center as human Marines fought their way through his ship. These creatures were smaller than his warriors, but they moved faster and fought with a viciousness that his people had never encountered. When the Marines finally reached the bridge, Alpha Prime was surprised to see that their leader was a human female named Grace Murphy who barely reached his chest in height, but when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a fight. Designation Alpha Prime, she said calmly. I am ordering you to surrender your fleet immediately. Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed. You cannot defeat the Void Stalkers, Alpha Prime replied. We are the terror of the galaxy. We have destroyed 1,000 worlds. Look around, Grace said, gesturing to the damaged bridge where half of his crew lay unconscious. Your flagship has been captured by 25 humans with hand weapons. Your stealth technology has been neutralized. Your fleet is scattered and confused. What part of this looks like victory to you? Through the bridge windows, Alpha Prime could see the rest of the battle unfolding in space around them. His supposedly unstoppable raiders were being outfought and outmaneuvered by human pilots who seemed to enjoy turning space combat into an art form. This is impossible, he said weakly. This is humanity, Grace replied. We have been fighting wars since before we learned to make fire. We have turned warfare into a science, an art, and a way of life. The only thing that has changed is that now we fight among the stars instead of on one planet. Within an hour, the battle was over. 37 Void Stalker ships had been destroyed or captured. The 3 vessels that managed to escape carried news of the defeat back to the farthest corners of the galaxy. Admiral Carter stood on his bridge, looking at the wreckage of the enemy fleet floating in space around Earth. His own losses had been minimal, just 2 ships damaged and a handful of casualties. The victory had been so complete that it seemed almost unfair. "Admiral," called his communications officer, "we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. It looks like every major civilization monitored this battle." "What are they saying?" Carter asked. "Mostly they are asking for non-aggression treaties, sir. It seems everyone wants to be friends with humanity now." Carter smiled and activated the ship's general communications system. "This is Admiral Carter of the Earth Defense Fleet. To all civilizations monitoring this transmission, please be advised that humanity seeks peaceful relationships with all species. We have no desire to conquer or dominate anyone." He paused for a moment, then continued in a voice that carried across the galaxy. "However, any species that threatens human lives or human worlds will discover that we are very good at making war. We recommend peaceful cooperation as the preferable alternative." As news of humanity's second great victory spread through the galactic communication networks, representatives from dozens of civilizations began preparing diplomatic missions to Earth. The species that had once seen humans as primitive farmers now understood the truth. Humanity was not just another civilization to be conquered or contained. They were something new in the galaxy, a species that had turned the art of war into a tool for preserving peace. Their name would be spoken with respect, fear, and wonder for generations to come. The savage war that had begun on a small farming world had ended with humanity taking its place among the great powers of the galaxy, not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that sometimes the most dangerous species was the one that wanted nothing more than to be left alone.